February wind cut across the cemetery like a promise no one intended to keep. Frozen mud crunched under dress shoes that weren't built for ranch country. Diesel exhaust from idling trucks mixed with the smell of overturned earth. Dirt so cold it looked gray instead of brown. 20 mourners huddled around a pine casket. Breath clouded. Hands shoved deep in coat pockets. The girl stood apart. 9 years old, no gloves, clutching a dented tin box against her chest like it held the only truth left in the world. Her coat was too thin for the wind. No one moved to share theirs. The preacher finished. Before the first shovel of dirt hit wood, a man in a camel hair coat stepped forward. "We'll take her now." Victor Hale didn't look at the girl when he said it. He spoke to the Reverend like she was furniture being claimed after an estate sale. His wife opened the Cadillac's back door, engine running, warm air spilling out into February cold. "Lila, get in the car." The girl didn't move. "Lila?" Victor's voice dropped to register. Not quite a threat, not quite anything you could call him on later. She shook her head once, his hand shot out, grabbed her wrist hard enough that the tin box fell, hit frozen ground with a metallic thud, but didn't open. A rancher in a worn Carhartt jacket stepped between them. "Let her go." Victor released her, smoothed his coat like nothing had happened, smiled the way men smile when they're used to winning. "This is family business, Grant." Elias Grant looked at the girl. Her wrist was already bruising. Her eyes were empty in a way that made his chest hurt. Then why is she shaking? Victor leaned close. Close enough that Elias could smell expensive cologne and something underneath it. Something sour like desperation wearing a good suit. "You have no idea what you just started." Elias picked up the tin box from the frozen mud. Lila followed him to his truck without being asked. Didn't speak the entire 20-minute drive up the mountain road. The ranch house smelled like cold stone and decades of wood smoke. Ice storm had taken the power lines down that morning. County said they wouldn't reach his road until spring. Maybe April, maybe later. Elias didn't mind. He lived without electricity before. He lit the old railroad lantern instead, the one his great-grandfather had carried building the transcontinental line in 1892. Warm yellow light filled the kitchen, pushed shadows into corners where they belonged. Lila sat at the table, still wearing her funeral coat, tin box on her lap. She hadn't let go of it since the cemetery. Elias busied himself at the wood stove, heating milk in a dented saucepan. His hands remembered the motions from another life. 20 years since his wife died pregnant, taking their unborn son with her. He'd sworn he'd never heat milk for a child again. Funny how promises broke when you weren't looking. "You allergic to anything?" She shook her head. He poured the milk into a chipped mug, set it in front of her. She wrapped both hands around it, but didn't drink, just stared at the lantern. Grandpa had one just like that. Her voice came out small, but steady. He said it saved his life once. Elias sat across from her. "How's that?" He got lost in a blizzard when he was young. Almost froze. Said he followed a lantern light for 2 miles before he realized it was his own reflection in the ice. She looked up. Kept him moving. Movement kept him alive. The scent of warm milk mixed with the wood smoke. Outside, wind rattled the window frames. "Your grandpa was a smart man." "He said you were smarter." She said it matter of fact, like she was reading from a book. "Said you walked away from a fight most men would have killed for." The words hit like a fist to the sternum. Roy Hale had been the only family member who'd spoken to him after the inheritance dispute tore the Blackwood apart. 20 years of silence from everyone else. And now this. A child carrying messages from a dead friend like some kind of ghost messenger. What else did he say? Lila opened the tin box, withdrew a folded letter, edges worn soft from repeated reading. She didn't hand it over, just read aloud in that careful voice children use when they've memorized something important. Elias, if you're hearing this, I'm gone and Lila needs you. Victor's been circling like a vulture for 3 years. He knows about the mineral rights, uranium under the ranch, worth millions. My lawyer drafted a will, leaving everything to Lila. Victor as guardian. I wrote a second will handwritten legal in Wyoming if witnessed. Names you. It's in the box. Josiah Reed from the church signed it. So did Dr. Finley. Protect her. They'll come for the money. Don't let them take her soul with it. Roy. Elias's throat tightened. The stove ticked as metal expanded in the heat. When did he write that? 3 days before he died. She folded the letter with precise creases like she'd done it 100 times. Made me memorize where you lived. Drew me maps of the mountain roads. Victor know about this? No. She looked at him with eyes too old for 9 years. Grandpa said secrets stay secret if you only tell one person. Outside, headlights swept across the kitchen window. A truck engine idled then shut off. Heavy boots on the porch steps, confident, unhurried. Elias stood, moved to the window. Black Cadillac in his driveway. Victor Hale and 2 men in suits climbing out, breath clouding in the cold. They followed us, Lila whispered. Stay here. He opened the door before Victor could knock. Victor didn't wait for an invitation. He stepped onto the porch, flanked by the 2 lawyers like a man accustomed to intimidation working in his favor. Elias, we need to talk about the girl. She's got a name. Lila? Fine. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. She's family. We've made arrangements. Boarding school in Denver. Trust fund managed by professionals. She'll want for nothing. Except anyone who gives a damn about her. One of the lawyers stepped forward. Weasel-faced briefcase that probably cost more than Elias's truck. The smell of expensive leather and cologne filled the porch. Mr. Grant, we're prepared to be reasonable. But the law is clear. Mr. Hale is next of kin. Temporary custody papers were filed this morning. He produced a document, held it out. Elias didn't take it. You filed custody papers before the man was in the ground. Victor had the decency to look uncomfortable for half a second. Roy's death was expected. We wanted to ensure a smooth transition for Lila's sake. Her sake, right? Elias crossed his arms. Where were you 3 days ago when Roy was dying? Week before that, month. I'm not answering to you, Grant. This is a family matter. Funny thing about family. Elias's voice stayed level. Usually shows up during funerals, not just after. The second lawyer spoke. A woman with ice in her voice and a briefcase twin to the first. Mr. Hale has legal standing. You don't. If you don't surrender the child voluntarily, we'll involve the county sheriff by morning. Do you really want this to escalate? Elias thought about the handwritten will in that tin box, about Roy's letter, about the way Lila's wrist had bruised when Victor grabbed her at the cemetery. She stays here tonight. You want to involve the sheriff? Go ahead, but she's not leaving this ranch unless she wants to. Victor's pleasant mask cracked. You're making a mistake. Wouldn't be my first. The weasel lawyer pulled another paper from his briefcase. Probate notice, Mr. Grant. Roy Hale's estate enters a 120-day review period as of today. If no valid will contest is filed, estate defaults to next of kin per Wyoming Statute 26101. He pressed the paper into Elias's hand. That's Mr. Hale. Victor leaned close. His breath smelled like whiskey trying to hide behind mints. 120 days, Elias. Then she's mine. The ranch is mine. And whatever's under it is mine. You can play hero for 4 months if it makes you sleep better. But come May, I win. They left, headlights swept back down the driveway, red tail lights disappearing into February darkness. Elias looked at the probate notice. The deadline typed in clean bureaucratic certainty. April 28, 1975. Inside, Lila stood in the kitchen doorway. Lantern light behind her made a small shadow that stretched across the floor to his boots. He's going to take me, isn't he? Elias folded the paper, slipped it into his coat pocket. Not if I can help it. She almost smiled. Grandpa said you'd say that. The smile faded. He also said you'd need help. That you couldn't win this alone. He say who'd help? A lady who keeps records. A preacher who tells the truth. She paused. And something frozen that won't stay frozen forever. The county courthouse smelled like linseed oil in 80 years of bureaucratic permanence. Edith Langford had worked the records room since 1947, and she knew every filing cabinet, every misfiled deed, every drawer that stuck in humid weather. When Elias and Lila walked in, she was kneeling in front of an open vault surrounded by scattered papers. Her hands trembled, not from age, but from rage. Mrs. Langford, she looked up, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Elias Grant, heard you were causing trouble with the Hale estate. Didn't know defending a child counted as trouble. Edith stood, knees popping, dusted off her skirt. She studied Lila for a long moment. You're Roy's granddaughter. Got his eyes. Lila nodded. He was a good man. Came in here twice a month like clockwork, checking land records, survey maps, always polite, always tipped his hat. Edith's expression darkened. Which is why I don't appreciate vandals destroying his legacy. She gestured to the vault. The lock mechanism was scratched. Metal shavings on the floor caught the overhead light. Inside drawer F1 1992 hung open, empty. When did this happen? Discovered it this morning. Vault was locked when I left last night. No sign of forced entry on the building. She pulled her cardigan tighter. Whoever did this had a key. Elias felt ice in his stomach. What was in that drawer? Original homestead deeds for all properties filed between 1890 and 1895. Railroad land grants, mineral rights transfers, survey plats. She pointed to the empty space. Your family's ranch, Grant property, 3,000 acres, filed April 1892. That deed should be here. It's not. The radiator hissed in the corner. Warm air mixing with the smell of old paper and floor wax. Could it have been misfiled? Edith gave him a look that could have curdled milk. I've been filing documents for 28 years. I don't misfile. Lila tugged Elias's sleeve. Grandpa said the ranch was like a tree with roots going back to the beginning. He said some people only see branches, but roots are what matter. Edith's eyes softened. Smart girl. Your grandpa understood land law better than most lawyers. She turned to Elias. Without that original deed, proving continuous ownership is going to be hell. Victor's lawyers will claim gaps in the chain of title. What do I need? Proof, deed, survey maps, tax records, anything showing unbroken grant ownership since 1892. She paused, but most of those records cross-reference the original homestead patent, which is now missing. Elias's hands clenched. This wasn't random. No. Edith pulled him aside, voice dropping. Someone knew exactly which drawer to hit. That takes knowledge. Either they researched your property history or they had help from someone who works here. Edith's jaw tightened. I've got 3 clerks. 2 been here less than a year. Third one, Harlan Yates. Just bought a new truck, cash on a county salary. Outside, a car door slammed. Footsteps on the courthouse steps. Edith moved to the window. Speaking of which, Judge Harlan's office smelled like pipe tobacco and leather-bound law books. He sat behind a desk that had probably witnessed 50 years of Wyoming disputes. Water rights, property lines, family feuds that lasted generations. Victor sat to the left, flanked by his weasel lawyer. Elias sat to the right, Lila beside him. No lawyer. Couldn't afford one on what the ranch brought in. The judge examined both wills, the typed one, crisp and professional. The handwritten one, Roy's shaky script on lined paper. M. Hale, you're claiming this handwritten document supersedes the properly executed will filed with Mr. Hale's attorney. I'm claiming it's what Roy wanted, signed and witnessed legal in Wyoming. The weasel lawyer leaned forward. Your Honor, handwritten wills require 2 living witnesses to be valid under Statute 26112. Mr. Grant claims Josiah Reed and Dr. Finley witnessed. Dr. Finley died 6 months ago. Convenient. Elias's chest tightened. Josiah is still alive. He'll testify. Will he? Victor's voice was smooth as creek ice. Because I spoke with Reverend Reed yesterday. He seemed quite confused about the whole matter. The judge studied the handwritten will, frowned. The second signature here says I Reed, not Josiah Reed. Same person, Elias said. Josiah sometimes what, Mr. Grant? Sometimes forgets his own name. The weasel lawyer pulled out another document. We also have concerns about the child's legitimacy. Lila's mother left the family when she was 3. No marriage certificate on file. If she's illegitimate under state law, she can't inherit regardless of which will stands. Lila's hand found Elias's small, cold. Judge Harlan sighed, removed his glasses. This is a mess, gentlemen, and you've put a child in the middle of it. He tapped the handwritten will. Without 2 living, clearly identified witnesses, I can't accept this as valid. And without proof of legitimate birth, inheritance is contested. He looked at Elias. You have until April 28 to produce both. Otherwise, estate defaults to Mr. Hale per the typed will. Your Honor, that's my ruling. The gavel came down, sharp crack that echoed off the walls. Victor stood, straightened his coat, smiled at Elias on his way out, the kind of smile that said checkmate. In the hallway, the weasel lawyer handed Elias another paper. Discovery deadline. You'll need to prove clear title to the property and the child's legitimate heirship. 63 days, Mr. Grant. Clock's ticking. They left. Expensive shoes clicking on marble floors. Elias looked at the paper, then at Lila. We're going to lose, aren't we? She whispered. Outside the window, February snow started falling. The kind that buried things until spring. The church smelled like old hymns and lemon furniture polish. Reverend Josiah Reed sat behind a desk cluttered with Sunday school materials in a Bible so worn the leather had gone soft as cloth. He was 65, black in a town that was 90% white, and he'd shepherded this congregation for 30 years through quiet dignity and careful words. When Elias knocked, Josiah's face showed he'd been expecting this visit, dreading it, maybe. Come in, Elias. Lila, he gestured to chairs. I suppose you want to talk about Roy's will. You signed it. I did. Josiah's hands folded on the desk steady. But Elias could see the tension in his shoulders. 3 days before he died, Roy asked me to witness his wishes. So I did. Judge says the signature reads, I Reed, not Josiah Reed. Josiah closed his eyes. I know. Why? The old preacher was quiet for a long moment. Outside, church bells rang the hour. The sound echoed off the surrounding mountains. Because I was afraid, Josiah said finally. Black man's signature on a white family's legal papers in 1974, Wyoming. He shook his head. I've seen what happens when men like me get involved in property disputes worth millions. Roy told me about the uranium, the mining companies, the kind of people who'd come looking. He opened his eyes, met Elias's gaze. So, I signed my name wrong. Not a lie. Exactly. I read is technically me, but different enough that if anyone came asking, I could claim confusion. Old man's handwriting. Presbyopia. His voice dropped. Cowardice dressed up as caution. Lila spoke for the first time. Grandpa said you were the bravest man he knew. Josiah's eyes glistened. Your grandpa was kind and wrong. He said you stood up to men with hoods when other preachers looked away. He said you preached truth when lies would have been safer. She pulled a small photograph from her coat pocket, handed it to Josiah. He kept this in his Bible. You and him and 3 other men rebuilding a burned church, 1965. Josiah took the photo. His hand trembled. Freedom Summer, he whispered. Roy drove all the way to Mississippi to help. Didn't ask for credit. Just showed up with lumber and nails. He looked at Elias. Your friend was a good man. So are you, Elias said. And right now, Lila needs you to be brave one more time. Josiah set the photo down carefully, pulled his own Bible from the desk drawer, different from the pulpit one, personal. He opened it to the back cover. Inside, tucked into the binding, was a folded paper. Roy gave me this the same day we signed the will. Said if anything happened to him, if anyone questioned his wishes, I should keep it safe. He unfolded it. A second copy of the handwritten will, this one with Josiah Reed, spelled out in full. He made 2, Elias breathed. He said, men like Victor count on fear keeping people quiet. So, he gave me insurance, a second copy, properly signed, hidden where lawyers wouldn't think to look. Josiah's voice strengthened. I'll testify. Full name. No more hiding. Lila reached across the desk, took the old preacher's hand. Thank you, Josiah squeezed her hand gently. I was a coward when your grandpa needed me. I won't be twice. The courthouse was dark except for the records room. Edith Langford sat surrounded by ledgers, her grandson Leo asleep in a chair nearby. He'd driven up from college to help her search. History major, good with dusty documents and cramped handwriting. She'd been at this for 6 hours. Eyes burning, back aching. Then she found it filed in the wrong box. Drawer L instead of drawer G. A land office receipt dated April 15, 1892. Homestead patent filing grant J. Jonathan 30,000 acres railroad grant filed concurrent with equipment inventory per federal requirement. Below that a list tool supplies and at the bottom railroad lantern brass serial RT1T9247 property of J. Grant Edith's heart hammered. She pulled the 1892 ledger closer cross-referenced the serial number there. Same number, same date. The lantern Elias had in his kitchen, the one his great-grandfather carried, was listed as proof of filing. Federal Land Office required railroad workers to inventory their equipment when claiming homestead grants. The lantern wasn't just a family heirloom. It was legal evidence. She grabbed the phone, dialed Elias's number. It rang 8 times before he answered, voice thick with sleep. Edith, the lantern. Your great-grandfather's lantern. Is the serial number still visible? What? The brass plate. Does it still have the engraving? Silence. Then hold on. She heard him moving. A match striking the creak of old hinges. T1T92Z047. Elias said. Why? Edith laughed. Actually laughed. First time in 2 weeks she'd felt anything close to hope. Because I just found the land office receipt that proves your family's owned that ranch since the day it was filed. And that lantern is the key. Outside the courthouse window, Leo stirred, sat up. Grandma, someone's watching the building. Edith looked. A shadow moved past the street lamp, disappeared into the alley. The line went dead. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease. Elias and Lila took a booth in the back, same one he'd sat in for 20 years when he came to town for supplies. This time was different. The conversations didn't stop when they walked in. That would have been too obvious. But they changed, shifted. Voices dropped to whispers that somehow carried better than normal speech. Heard her mama ran off when she was 3. No marriage certificate on file, Myra said. Who's to say Roy was even blood relation? Lila kept her eyes on the menu, didn't look up, but Elias saw her hands tighten on the laminated edges. The waitress, Faye, worked here 15 years, brought coffee without meeting Elias's eyes. Know what you want? 2 eggs, toast, milk for her. Faye nodded. Left without the small talk she usually made about weather or cattle prices. 3 booths down, a woman Elias didn't recognize sat with coffee and a newspaper she wasn't reading. Expensive coat, hairstyled in a way that didn't happen at Lena's salon on Main Street. She looked over, made eye contact, smiled, then loud enough to carry. Tragic when children pay for their parents' mistakes. The diner went silent. The woman stood, walked past their booth, dropped a business card on the table. Felicity Hale Donovan, family law consultant, Denver, Victor's daughter. She leaned down, voice still pitched for the audience. My father's prepared to be generous. Boarding school, college fund, clean slate. She glanced at Lila. Better than growing up with people whispering about legitimacy. Lila stood so fast her water glass tipped. Didn't spill, but came close. She walked straight to the restroom. Didn't run, didn't cry, just walked. Elias stood too, looked at Felicity. Your father sent you to do this. My father's trying to help a child caught in an ugly situation. She smiled. You're the one making it ugly, Mr. Grant. She left. The door chimed. Outside, a black sedan pulled away. Elias found Lila in the restroom sitting on the floor, drawing in her notebook, not crying, just drawing with fierce, tight strokes. The sketch showed the courthouse and beneath it words in careful print. Grandpa said ice house, east fence, spring. What's that mean? I don't know. She looked up, but he made me write it down 3 times. Said if things got bad, I should remember. East fence, ice house, spring. Elias found them on the east fence line. 3 men in hard hats in a bulldozer that had no business being on his property. They'd already pulled up 2 boundary stakes. The old ones weathered iron post. His grandfather had set in 1902. 73 years in the ground, and these men had yanked them out like they were nothing more than fence posts. The bulldozer blade was lowering toward a third. Hey, Elias ran. The foreman saw him coming and signaled. The bulldozer stopped. Engine idling, diesel exhaust thick in the March air. Help you? The foreman didn't look as concerned. This is private property. Actually, the man pulled a paper from his clipboard. County survey says this is disputed boundary. We got a permit to re-establish accurate property lines. Disputed by who? Mineral Rights Assessment Bureau. He handed Elias the permit. Official seal signed by the county commissioner. Elias's hands shook. These markers have been here since 1902. Yeah, well, old surveys weren't always accurate. We're fixing that. The bulldozer lurched forward. Blade hit the 3rd marker. Iron screeched. The post bent, then snapped. 100 years of proof folding like tin. Elias stepped in front of the machine. The operator killed the engine. Climbed down. Big man worked outdoors his whole life by the look of him. You need to move, sir. You need to get off my land, sir. Tires on gravel. Elias turned. Black Cadillac pulling up. Victor got out. Walked over like he owned the place. Maybe in 60 days he would. Elias, don't make this harder than it has to be. You got a mining company permit. This isn't about property lines. Victor's smile was thin. Uranium under your ranch is worth $4.2 million. Odds. You think I'm going to let some handwritten will and a little girl stand in the way of that? He pulled a document from his coat, tossed it at Elias's feet. Mineral assessment contract signed with Sierra Nevada Mining 3 months ago. Roy knew. That's why he tried to change his will. Victor's voice hardened. Girl's a legal obstacle. Nothing more. And obstacles get removed. The foreman handed Elias a demolition completion report. All 3 1902 markers destroyed. Last physical proof of the old boundary lines gone. Victor got back in his car. Window down. 63 days left. Grant. Grant. What's your move? The Cadillac drove away. The crew packed up. Left Elias standing in mud where iron posts used to be. East fence. Ice house. Spring. He looked at the ground. Tried to remember where Roy's old root cellar had been back when the creek ran different before the county rerouted it in '58. Somewhere near here, buried, frozen, waiting for spring. The blizzard broke on a Tuesday morning. Elias woke to silence, the kind that meant the wind had finally stopped trying to tear the world apart. He found Lila already awake in the kitchen, railroad lantern lit, even though the power had come back on during the night. She sat at the table with her notebook, drawing the fence line from memory. Storm's over, he said. She looked up. Does that mean we can fix it? Fix what? The fence where they broke it. Elias pulled on his coat, looked out the window. Snow had drifted against the barn, but the sun was breaking through clouds for the first time in a week, warm enough that the icicles hanging from the eaves were starting to drip. Yeah, we can fix it. They walked to the east fence line together. The snow came up to Lila's knees in places. She struggled through it without complaint. That slight limp from childhood polio making her gait uneven, but determined where the surveyors had destroyed the old markers Elias had already set temporary posts knew would not the same, but they'd hold until he could afford proper iron stakes. He showed her how to splice barbed wire where it had been cut, how to wrap the end so they wouldn't unravel. His hands remembered the motions his father had taught him the same way, and his grandfather before that. Wires, he said, top ones for keeping cattle in, bottoms for keeping predators out. Middle one. He paused. Middle ones for reminding folks where they stand. Lila touched the middle wire carefully. Which one are we? Cattle or predators? Neither. We're the ones doing the mending. He pulled the post hole digger from the truck bed. Old tool handle worn smooth from decades of use. Engraved on the metal blade. J. Grant, 1902. Jonathan Grant, his great-grandfather. The man who'd built the first fence on this land. Your great-great-grandfather used this? His father before him probably. Tool like this. You take care of it. It'll outlast you. He demonstrated how to drive it into the half-frozen ground. Harder than summer digging, but not impossible. Your turn. She took the handles. Too big for her hands, but she gripped tight, lifted, drove down. The blade barely scratched the surface. Again she tried, and again and again. On the 7th try the blade bit deep enough to matter. Good. Now lever it out. She did. A plug of frozen earth came up. Steam rose from the hole where warmth from below met March air. They worked in silence for a while. The smell of thawing ground mixed with the scent of pine sap and distant wood smoke from someone's chimney down the valley. On the fourth post, Lila's hand slipped on the digger. The blade caught her palm on a rough spot, not deep, but enough to draw blood. Elias wrapped it with a handkerchief from his pocket. Clean but worn soft from washing. Anything worth protecting draws blood sometimes, he said. She looked at him. Is that why you're bleeding inside? The question hit harder than the March wind. What makes you say that? You don't sleep much. I hear you walking around at night, and sometimes when you think I'm not looking, you touch your chest like something hurts there. She flexed her bandaged hand. Grandpa said some wounds don't show. Said, the worst ones are the ones people carry. Quiet. Elias sat on the truck tailgate. Lila climbed up beside him. I had a wife once, he said. And we were going to have a son. She died in childbirth. He died with her 20 years ago this May. Is that why you live alone? Was until you showed up. Are you sorry I did? He looked at her. 9 years old, orphaned, limping, fighting for an inheritance she didn't even understand the size of. Brave in ways he'd forgotten how to be. No, I'm sorry it took 20 years for someone to need me again. She leaned against his shoulder, small, solid, real. Grandpa said you were waiting for the right fight, that you'd know it when it came. Your grandpa talked about me too much. He loved you like a brother. Elias's throat tightened. He looked at the fence line stretching toward the horizon, the posts they'd set, the wire they'd mended. Temporary repairs on land that had been in his family since before Wyoming was a state. We should head back. Sun's dropping. Uncle Elias. Yeah. When we win, if we win, can we keep doing this? The fence mending. He helped her down from the tailgate. When we win, we'll do this every spring. Deal? She smiled. First real smile he'd seen from her in 2 weeks. Deal. They walked back toward the ranch house. Behind them, the new fence post stood straight in the ground. Not iron, not permanent, but holding the line just the same. Floyd's Hardware had been on Main Street since 1947. Same year, Edith started at the courthouse. Same year, Elias's father came back from the war and started running the ranch full-time. Floyd himself was 72, hands gnarled from arthritis, but still strong enough to lift 50-pound feed sacks. He stood behind the counter when Elias walked in, sorting screws into small paper bags, with the careful precision of a man who'd been doing the same task for 50 years. Elias. He didn't look up. Need something? Fence staples. Box of 3 inches. Floyd reached under the counter, pulled out the box, set it down harder than necessary. That'll be $450. Elias handed him a 5. Floyd made change. The transaction happened in silence, thick enough to taste. Floyd, something wrong. The old man's jaw worked. He glanced toward the front window. Across the street, a black sedan was parked. Same one Felicity had driven away in at the diner. You should know, Floyd said quietly. George Whitaker at the bank called me last week. Said I should think carefully about who I do business with. Said property disputes can get messy. Said sometimes it's better to stay neutral. George is Victor's poker buddy. I know who he is. Floyd's voice dropped further. He's also the man who approved my equipment loan last year. $30,000. Still owe 22. The door chimed. 2 women came in. Lena from the salon and her sister. They looked at Elias, looked away. Moved to the paint section and started talking in whispers that carried. Heard the judge might rule against him. Well, if she's not legitimate. Seems cruel, though. She's just a child. Floyd's hand stilled on the screw sorting. Elias picked up his staples. Thanks, Floyd. Wait. Floyd reached under the counter again, pulled out a manila envelope. His hand shook slightly. Surveyor crew was in here 3 weeks ago. Bought supplies, chalkline, stakes, the works. He pushed the envelope across. Left these blueprints on my counter. Said it was an accident. Came back for them the next day. Why are you telling me this? Because I made copies first. Floyd's voice steadied. I fought in Korea, Elias. I know what it looks like when someone's running a campaign. And this, he tapped the envelope. This is a campaign. They're not surveying boundaries. They're mapping mineral deposits. Elias opened the envelope. Inside, blueprints showing his ranch property overlaid with topographical markers and highlighted sections labeled with chemical symbols. U-238 uranium concentrated in 3 areas. The largest deposit ran directly under where the old root cellar used to be near the east fence where Roy had told Lila to remember. Jesus! Elias breathed. There's more. Floyd pulled out a ledger, his personal accounts book. George Whitaker's been calling other businesses, diner, feed store, garage, telling them to stop serving you. Faye at the diner already caved. Said she can't afford to lose her restaurant loan. But you can afford to lose yours. Floyd smiled, thin, tired. I'm 72 years old. I'll be dead before they foreclose. But that little girl you're fighting for, she's got 70 more years ahead of her, maybe more. He closed the ledger. Some things are worth the risk. The door chimed again. This time it was Leo, Edith's grandson, out of breath like he'd been running. Mr. Grant, Grandma needs you at the courthouse now. Edith's office smelled like old paper and the lavender hand lotion she'd used for 30 years. She sat at her desk, face pale, holding a file folder like it might explode. Leo stood by the door and sitting in the chair across from Edith, Felicity, Hale Donovan, Victor's daughter. Elias stopped in the doorway. What's this? Sit down, Edith said. You need to hear this. Felicity looked different than she had at the diner. No expensive coat, hair pulled back simply, eyes red like she'd been crying. Mr. Grant. Her voice was steady but quiet. I need to tell you something about my father. Elias stayed standing. I don't want to hear anything you have to say. I don't blame you after what I did at the diner. She stopped, started again. I came to apologize and to help. Help? Yes. She opened her purse, pulled out a small recording device, the kind lawyers used for depositions. I've been recording my father's phone calls for 3 weeks since I realized what he was planning. She pressed play. Victor's voice came through tiny but clear. Don't care what it costs. The state home in Cheyenne has a long-term care wing. I need her placed there by May 1st. Another voice, older administrative. Mr. Hale, we generally require medical necessity for placement. The child would need to be she has a limp. Childhood polio. That's medical necessity. Sir, polio survivors don't require institutional care. I'm paying you $50,000. Find a reason. Silent on the recording. Then we'll need a psychiatric evaluation. If she's deemed unable to care for herself, whatever it takes. Just have the paperwork ready. Felicity stopped the recording. Her hands trembled. I was in the next room when he made that call. I knew he wanted the money. I didn't know. Her voice broke. I didn't know he was planning to lock her away. Edith's face was stone. There's more. Felicity pulled papers from her purse. Old documents, birth certificate, marriage license. My grandfather, Roy, he kept these in his Bible. My father doesn't know I have them. She laid them on the desk. Lila's parents were married. Church wedding 1965, legal and recorded. She pointed to the marriage license. Clara Hale and Nathan Donovan. My mother's maiden name was Clara Hale, Roy's daughter. Nathan Donovan was her husband. Why does this matter? Elias asked. Because my father's been telling the court that Lila's mother ran off with some man she wasn't married to. That Lila was born out of wedlock. It's a lie. Felicity's voice hardened. Clara died in a car accident when Lila was 3. Nathan died with her. My grandfather raised Lila alone after that. Everything was legal. Everything was legitimate. Edith examined the documents. These are originals, not copies. I took them from my father's safe last night. He's been hiding them to support his legitimacy challenge. Felicity looked at Elias. I'm his daughter, but he's a monster, and I won't help him destroy a child's life for money. Elias sat down slowly. Why should I trust you? Because I brought something else. She pulled out a key. Small brass. This opens the storage unit where my father's keeping the original 1892 deed. The one that was stolen from the courthouse vault. Harlan Yates, the clerk. He gave it to my father. My father paid him $5,000 and promised him a job with the mining company after this is all over. Edith's hands clenched. Where's the storage unit? Cheyenne, Unit 247 at Store Safe on Highway 85. Felicity set the key on the desk. I don't know if this helps, but it's all I have to give. She stood. Elias stood too. Why are you doing this? Felicity's eyes met his. Because when I was 9 years old, my father forgot my birthday. Roy didn't. He drove 3 hours to bring me a cake he baked himself. Chocolate. My favorite. She smiled, sad. He said family was the people who showed up, and my father's never shown up for anyone but himself. She walked to the door, stopped. The hearing's April 28th. That's 16 days from now. He's planning something for the week before. I don't know what, but he told someone on the phone they won't see it coming. She left. The door closed quietly behind her. Edith picked up the key. Leo, you still have your college friend with the truck? Yeah. How fast can you get to Cheyenne? Leo grinned. 3 hours if I don't stop for gas. Go get that deed. Bring it straight back here. Don't stop. Don't tell anyone. She looked at Elias. We've got 16 days to finish what Roy started. Elias picked up the marriage license, ran his thumb over the signatures. Roy's daughter, Lila's mother, a whole family tree that Victor had tried to cut down with lies. Edith, you said you found the Lantern serial number in the old land office records. I did. Cross-references with your great-grandfather's homestead filing. Could you testify to that in court? I'm a county employee. My testimony might be seen as biased. But the records aren't biased. Edith smiled. First real smile he'd seen from her in weeks. No, records don't lie. People do. She pulled out a massive ledger. 1892 Land Office Registry. Opened it to a page marked with a yellow ribbon. There in faded but still legible script, April 15, 1892. Grant, Jonathan, 3,000 acres. Railroad Homestead Grant. Equipment inventory filed. Tools wagon livestock lantern. Brass serial T1922047. Deed filed concurrent. Mineral rights included per federal statute. If we can prove the lantern in your kitchen is the same one listed here, Edith said, we prove continuous ownership. Unbroken chain of title from 1892 to now. The serial number still there. I checked. Then we have half of what we need. She tapped the marriage license. And now we have the other half. Legitimacy. Leah was already halfway out the door. I'll be back by midnight. Edith called after him. Drive careful. You're carrying evidence that could put men in prison. The door closed. The office fell quiet except for the ticking of Edith's desk clock and the distant sound of traffic on Main Street. Elias looked at the blueprints Floyd had given him. The mineral deposit map. The uranium seams running through his land like veins of poison. For $0.2 million, he said quietly. That's what Victor told me it's worth. More than that now. Uranium prices went up 15% last month. Energy crisis. Edith closed the ledger carefully. Men have killed for less. Roy knew that's why he changed his will and that's why someone poisoned him. Elias looked at her sharply. What? Edith pulled another file. Medical records. I've been doing some research. Roy's doctor noted unusual symptoms in his final months. Neurological issues, kidney problems consistent with heavy metal poisoning. She met his eyes. I can't prove it, but I'd bet everything I own that someone was slowly killing him to speed up the inheritance. The window rattled. Wind picking up outside. The kind of wind that came before spring storms. 16 days until the hearing. 16 days to prove a century of ownership. A child's legitimacy. And a conspiracy that ran from a county clerk's office to a mining company boardroom. Elias picked up the brass key Felicity had left. One thing I don't understand, he said. Roy told Lila to remember Ice House, East Fence, Spring. Why Spring? What's waiting for Spring? Edith looked at the blueprints at the mineral deposit map at the place where the largest uranium concentration sat directly under where the old root cellar used to be. The creek, she said slowly. It's been frozen since January. Runs right past the east fence. She traced the line on the map. If there's something buried there, something Roy wanted you to find, it won't surface until the ice melts. They looked at each other. Outside, the temperature was climbing. 42 degrees, the warmest it had been since November. Spring was coming, and with it, whatever Roy had left behind. The check sat on the kitchen table like an accusation. $50,000, made out to Elias Grant, signed by Victor's lawyer, delivered that afternoon by a courier who wouldn't meet his eyes. The note attached was simple. Walk away. Take the girl somewhere safe. This ends. Elias stared at it. Outside, March wind rattled the windows. The railroad lantern cast shadows that moved across the walls like ghosts. 50,000 would buy a new start. Montana, maybe. Or Oregon. Somewhere Victor's lawyers couldn't find them. Somewhere Lila could grow up without people whispering about legitimacy and inheritance and blood that might not be blood. He could protect her. Just not here. Not on this land. The land his great-grandfather had claimed. His grandfather had defended. His father had died on heart attack while mending the north fence. 1968, for generations of Grants. All of them holding this ground. All of them believing it mattered. Elias picked up the check, held it to the lantern light. The paper was heavy, expensive, real. The door to Lila's room creaked. She stood in the hallway wearing the oversized shirt he'd given her to sleep in. Hair tangled, eyes clear. You're thinking about taking it, she said. Not a question, statement of fact. I'm thinking about keeping you safe. Running away isn't safe. It's just slower dying. She walked to the table, looked at the check, Grandpa said you'd know when to fight and that you'd know when to walk away. He said they were different things. What's the difference? Walking away is choosing something better. Running away is choosing to stop choosing. She pulled out a chair. Saturday. Which is this? Elias set the check down. His hands were shaking. I don't know. Yes, you do. He looked at her, 9 years old, orphaned, fighting for a future she didn't even understand, trusting him to know the right answer when he barely trusted himself. If I fight this and lose, they'll take you anyway. Put you in that state home. Lock you away because your limp makes you defective. His voice cracked. At least if I take the money, we go together. To where? Some town where nobody knows us. Where I grow up wondering if my grandpa was wrong to trust you. She shook her head. That's not safer. That's just lonelier. Lila? He left me something. Grandpa in the ice house. Her voice was certain. I don't know what it is, but he made me promise to find it. And I can't do that in Montana. Elias rubbed his face. 20 years of isolation, and now this child was asking him to fight the kind of battle that destroyed families, the kind he'd walked away from once before. What if I'm not strong enough? She reached across the table, took his hand, small fingers wrapping around his calloused palm. Then we'll be not strong enough together. The lantern flickered, wind gusted. Outside, something moved in the darkness. Probably deer, maybe cattle that had broken through the fence. Lila stood, went to the mantel, came back with an old photograph Elias kept in a frame he never looked at anymore. 3 men, young, building fence together, 1955. Elias on the left, Roy in the middle. Samuel, Elias's brother, dead 20 years, on the right. All of them grinning, all of them believing the world made sense and hard work mattered and family meant something. On the back, in Roy's handwriting, brothers by blood, by choice, by dirt. R.H. He gave this to you. Elias's throat was tight. No, I found it in his Bible with the marriage license in the other papers. Lila traced the edge of the frame. He told me once that you and Uncle Samuel fought over something that didn't matter, that you left because you thought leaving would stop the hurting, but it just moved the hurt somewhere else. That's not Elias stopped because it was true. I thought I was doing the right thing. Maybe you were then. She set the photograph down. But now's different. Now someone needs you to stay. Elias looked at the check, looked at the photograph, looked at this child who spoke with her grandfather's wisdom and her own fierce clarity. He picked up the check, tore it in half, tore it again, let the pieces fall like snow onto the kitchen table. Okay, he said. We fight. Lila smiled, went back to bed without another word. Like the matter had been settled all along and she'd just been waiting for him to catch up. Elias sat alone with the torn check in the old photograph and the lantern that had guided for generations of Grants through darkness. Outside the temperature was rising, 48 degrees. The creek ice would break soon. Whatever Roy had hidden, whatever truth waited frozen in the ground, spring would bring it home. The courthouse steps couldn't hold 200 people, so Judge Harlan moved the hearing to the church. Not inside, outside, on the wide stone steps where the whole town could witness. April rain had come overnight, soft, steady, smelling like thawed earth and new grass. By morning, it had stopped, leaving the world clean and dripping, the kind of spring morning that made promises about rebirth and second chances. Elias stood with Lila on one side, Edith on the other. Behind them, Leah with a leather satchel, Floyd from the hardware store, the doctor who'd treated Lila's polio when she was 4, a dozen other townspeople who decided that silence was the same as complicity. Across the steps, Victor and his lawyers, 3 of them now, all expensive suits and briefcases that cost more than most families made in a month. Judge Harlan sat in a chair someone had carried from the courthouse. No bench, no gavel, just an old man in black robes trying to find truth in a mess of lies and legal maneuvering. "We're here," he said, voice carrying across the crowd, "because the courthouse is a public building, and this is public business. Mr. Hale contests his uncle's handwritten will. Mr. Grant defends it. The law requires proof of validity and proof of legitimate heirship." He looked at both men. "Present your evidence." Victor's lead lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we maintain that the handwritten document lacks proper witnessing. One witness is deceased. The other, Reverend Reed, signed incorrectly, casting doubt on the document's authenticity. Furthermore, the child's legitimacy remains unproven. No marriage certificate has been filed." "No, that's a lie." Felicity Hale Donovan stood from the crowd, walked up the steps, handed the judge 2 documents. Marriage license, Clara Hale and Nathan Donovan, married June 12, 1965 at this church. Her voice was steady, loud enough for everyone to hear. Birth certificate. Lila Marie Donovan, born March 3, 1966. Parents listed Clara Hale Donovan and Nathan Donovan. Both documents were hidden in my father's safe to support a false legitimacy challenge. The crowd murmured. Victor's face went white, then red. "Felicity, I'm sorry, Father, but I won't help you imprison a child for money." Judge Harlan examined the documents. "These appear authentic. County seal. Proper signatures." He looked at Victor. "Mr. Hale, did you knowingly withhold evidence?" Victor's lawyer jumped in. "Your Honor, family documents are often misfiled in a safe." The judge's voice was ice. "Let's move on. The question of witnessing." Reverend Josiah Reed stood, walked up the steps slowly, each step deliberate. He carried his personal Bible, the one from his office, not the pulpit Bible. "Your Honor, I witnessed Roy Hale's will on March 10, 1975, 3 days before he died." Josiah's voice rang clear. "I signed my name as I read because I was afraid. Afraid of getting involved in a property dispute worth millions, afraid of what might happen to a black preacher who stood between white men and their money." He opened the Bible, withdrew a paper, but Roy knew I was afraid. So, he had me sign a second copy, this one with my full name. He told me to keep it safe, to bring it out when the time came. Josiah handed it to the judge. "The time's come. I'm Josiah Reed. I witnessed that will and I'll swear to it before God in this town." The crowd erupted, people standing, craning to see. Judge Harlan raised his hand for silence. "This is a duplicate of the handwritten will properly signed." He looked at Victor's lawyers. 2 witnesses, both living, both present. The will stands as valid. Victor's lead lawyer wasn't done. "Your Honor, the will may be valid, but it bequeaths property Mr. Grant cannot prove he owns. The original 1892 homestead deed is missing from county records without clear title. We found it." Leo stepped forward, opened the satchel, pulled out a metal deed box, old and battered. "Storage unit in Cheyenne, Unit 247, rented by Victor Hale." He handed the judge the key Felicity had provided. "Harlan Yates, county clerk, stole this from the courthouse vault, sold it to Mr. Hale for $5,000. We recovered it last night." Edith stood. "Your Honor, I can verify that deed box was stolen from my vault. I can also verify," she pulled out the massive 1892 ledger, "that the homestead deed inside cross-reference with this land office registry filed April 15, 1892. Jonathan Grant, 3,000 acres." She opened the ledger, pointed to a line. "Equipment inventory includes a brass railroad lantern. Serial number T1892047. She nodded to Elias. "Show them." Elias lifted the lantern he'd brought. Held it so sunlight caught the engraved plate. T189247. Same lantern, Edith said. Continuous ownership from 1892 to now. Unbroken chain of title. The Grant family has owned that land for 83 years. Judge Harlan examined the deed, the ledger, the lantern. The crowd was silent, 200 people holding their breath. Mr. Hale. The judge's voice cut like a blade. Did you pay Harlan Yates to steal county records? Victor stood. Your Honor, IA truck pulled up. Sheriff's vehicle. 2 deputies got out, followed by a man in a federal marshal's badge. The marshal walked up the steps, handed the judge a warrant. Federal investigation into mineral rights fraud and conspiracy to commit murder. We have evidence that Roy Hale was poisoned with heavy metals over a 6-month period. He looked at Victor. We have phone records showing you contacted a mining company about uranium rights 3 months before his death. We have financial records showing payments to Harlan Yates. He pulled out handcuffs. Victor Hale, you're under arrest. The crowd exploded. Victor's lawyer stepped back. Victor himself just stood there, face gray as the cuffs clicked shut. You think you won? He looked at Elias as the deputies led him away. She'll hate you for this someday, keeping her from millions. Elias didn't answer, just took Lila's hand. Judge Harlan stood. The handwritten will is valid. Lila Hale is the legitimate heir to Roy Hale's estate. Elias Grant is appointed legal guardian and trustee until she reaches age 25. He looked at the crowd. This hearing is concluded. People cheered. Floyd clapped Elias on the shoulder. Edith hugged Lila. Josiah offered a prayer of thanksgiving that people actually bowed their heads for. And through it all, Elias held Lila's hand and felt something in his chest unknot for the first time in 20 years. The creek ice had broken 3 days earlier. Elias had heard it in the night, a sound like the earth cracking open, followed by the rush of water finally allowed to move again after 4 months of frozen silence. Now, with the hearing finished and Victor in federal custody, Elias and Lila walked the east fence line one more time. Leo came with them, and Edith, though her knees, complained about the uneven ground. And Josiah, who said he wanted to see what Roy had been planning all along. The old root cellar sat 20 yards from the fence, half buried in a hillside that the 1958 creek rerouting had left high and dry. Stone walls covered in 70 years of moss and dirt, wooden door rotted through in places. Elias had walked past it 1,000 times, never thought much about it. Just another relic from when his grandparents had needed to keep food cold before electricity reached the mountain. Here, Leo asked. Lila nodded. Grandpa made me draw it over and over until I could sketch it from memory. She pulled out her notebook. The drawing she'd made matched the structure in front of them perfectly. Elias pulled the door. Hinges screamed. Inside, darkness and the smell of wet stone and earth that hadn't seen sunlight in decades. Leo shined a flashlight. The beam caught something wrapped in oilcloth on a stone shelf. Elias reached for it. The cloth crackled, frozen stiff despite the spring thaw. He carried it outside into the light, unwrapped it carefully. Inside, another deed box, smaller than the one they'd recovered from the storage unit. And beside it, wrapped separately, a second railroad lantern, twin to the one in Elias's kitchen. Brass plate engraved. R. Hale 1955. Roy's lantern. The one he'd carried working on the railroad before he'd settled in town. Tied to the handle. A note, Roy's handwriting, shaky but legible. Elias, if you're reading this, you won. Victor's in custody or dead and Lila is safe. The deed box has the original mineral rights transfer, signed by my father in 1920, giving the Grant family permanent rights to anything under this land. Your great-grandfather and my grandfather were partners. Built the railroad together, filed their homestead side by side. When uranium was found in '72, I made sure the rights stayed with you. Victor never knew. 2 lanterns, yours from 1892, mine from 1955, your great-grandfather lit the way west. The current date is November 14, 2025. I'm lighting the way forward. Keep them both burning. The money's not important. The land's not important. What's important is that you remember family isn't blood. It's who you'd walk through a blizzard for. Take care of her. She's the best thing our family's ever made. Your brother, Roy. Elias's hands shook. Edith took the letter, read it, passed it to Josiah. The old preacher's eyes glistened. Brothers, Josiah said softly. Not by blood, by choice. Lila took the second lantern, held it next to the one Elias had brought. 2 lights, 2 generations, 2 men who'd understood that some legacies couldn't be measured in dollars or acres. What's in the deed box? Leo asked. Edith opened it. Inside, the mineral rights transfer Roy had mentioned. And beneath that, a thick envelope, Elias's name written on the front. He opened it. Inside, adoption papers pre-filled, dated March 12, 1975, 2 days before Roy died. Petition for legal adoption. Petitioner Elias Grant, minor child Lila Marie Hale. All the blanks filled in, all the language legal and proper, just waiting for a signature and a judge's approval. Roy had known, had planned for this exact outcome, had believed despite everything, despite the odds that Elias would fight, would win, would choose fatherhood over isolation. He knew, Elias whispered the whole time. He knew. Lila took his hand. He said you were the strongest man in these mountains, that you just needed someone to fight for. Edith smiled, pulled reading glasses from her purse. Well, these adoption papers won't file themselves. Courthouse opens at 8 tomorrow morning. They drove to the east fence where the surveyors had destroyed the old boundary markers. Elias pulled the post hole digger from the truck bed, his great-grandfather's digger, the one engraved J. Grant 1902. Your turn, he said to Lila. She took the handles, lifted, drove the blade into soft April earth. This time it bit deep on the first try. Spring had thawed the ground, made it ready for new things to take root. They worked together, Elias guiding, Lila digging. When the hole was deep enough, he pulled a new iron post from the truck, not temporary wood this time. Permanent metal that would last another 70 years. Lila set it in the hole. Elias steadied it while she packed dirt around the base. Then together they drove it home with a sledgehammer that had hung in the barn since before either of them was born. 3 strikes. The post stood straight and true. Behind them, the community watched. Edith and Leo, Floyd, Josiah, Felicity, who'd driven back from Cheyenne to see the end of what she'd helped start. The doctor, the diner owner, who'd quietly started serving Elias again once Victor was arrested. 20 people, 30, all of them witnesses to a different kind of justice than courtrooms provided. Elias rested his hand on top of the post. Like your grandpa taught me, now I'm teaching you. Lila placed her hand beside his. Land don't remember names. It remembers who tends it. Josiah stepped forward, offered a blessing without being asked. Lord, bless this ground and those who will work it. Bless the child who inherits it and the man who will guide her. Bless the memory of Roy Hale who knew that family is built, not born. Amen. Amen. The crowd echoed. The sun dropped toward the western ridge. Golden light spilled across the valley. The fence line stretched toward the horizon. 3 wires humming in the evening breeze. Top for keeping what mattered in. Bottom for keeping what threatened out. Middle for reminding the world where one family's responsibility ended and another's began. Elias looked at Lila. She looked back, smiled. Ready to go home? He asked. She nodded. Yeah, home. They walk back to the truck together. Behind them, the new post caught the last sunlight. Solid, permanent proof that some things, land, legacy, love, couldn't be bought or stolen or broken by men whose only measure of worth was money. The community dispersed, trucks and cars pulling away. Voices carrying on the wind about dinners to cook and chores to finish and tomorrow's work waiting. Ordinary life resuming. But different now, changed by a child who'd refused to be abandoned and a man who'd remembered how to fight for something that mattered. 3 weeks later, the adoption papers were signed. Judge Harlan handled it in his chambers. No ceremony, no crowd, just Elias, Lila, Edith as witness, and Josiah offering a quiet prayer. Lila kept Hale as her middle name. Not for Victor. He was awaiting trial in federal prison. But for Roy, who'd carried it with honor and planned for this moment from beyond the grave. The ranch stayed in trust, managed by Edith until Lila turned 25. The uranium stayed in the ground. Some legacies, Elias decided, were worth more buried than sold. Spring came full that year. Meadowlarks returned to the high pastures 2 weeks early. Creek ran clear and cold, all trace of ice gone except in memory. The fence posts stood straight. New iron beside old wood, both holding the line. The 2 railroad lanterns sat side by side on the mantel. His great-grandfather's from 1892, Roy's from 1955. Twins separated by generations, reunited by a child's need and an old man's foresight. Elias lit them both some nights when the power was working fine. But he wanted the reminder of men who'd built things to last. Lila planted a garden behind the house. Tomatoes mostly because Roy had loved them. She talked to the plants the way he'd talked to her. Soft, patient, telling them stories about men who built railroads and women who kept records and preachers who found courage late but found it true. Elias watched from the porch, mending a bridle that didn't really need mending, just needed his hands busy while his heart learned to settle into something it hadn't felt in 20 years. Fatherhood at 52 felt like breaking a horse you thought was too wild to ride. Terrifying, humbling, and somehow exactly right. Uncle Elias, Lila called from the garden. She'd kept the title. Some habits were worth preserving. Yeah, think Grandpa would be proud. He looked at the garden, the lanterns glowing warm through the window, the fence stretching toward mountains that knew their names. The girl who'd walked through a blizzard of grief and greed and come out whole. I reckon he'd say we did all right. She smiled, went back to her tomatoes. The wind carried the scent of turned earth and new growth. Elias closed his eyes, let the May sun warm his face, and felt for the first time in 20 years like he'd finally come home. Not to a place, to a person worth staying.